Happy Easter, everybody. I hope today's a good day for y'all. I'm excited about our drive-in church service tonight. I hope to see you there. Today I have a little Easter story. It's part Bible and it's 3 parts imagination, and I hope you enjoy it. This is the only time that these boys are mentioned in the Bible that we know of. There's somebody else mentioned later in the Bible by one of them's name, but I'm not sure if it's the same person or a different person. But and I don't know if these boys happened to be there for this occasion, but their names were mentioned in Mark 15 and 21. And I'm going to tell you the story of Alexander and Rufus. This was going to be the most amazing trip ever, thought Alexander and Rufus as they went out to feed the lamb. It was a special lamb, one they had named Kenai. Daddy even let them help pick it out this year. The lamb had to be perfect, no bumps, no bobos, no cracked hooves, no broken bones. But why did it have to be Kenai? He was the sweetest lamb. He was more pet than part of the herd, and it saddened the boys to think they would have to offer this perfect little lamb as a sacrifice. Daddy, why must it be the best lamb it have? Why Kenai? Asked Rufus that night after dinner. Dad set them down once again and told them the story of the Passover, the time long ago when God delivered the Israelites from the Egyptians. God had caused a bunch of plagues to come upon the Egyptians, and the last one was the worst. The death angel visited Egypt, and all the firstborn boys died. Rufus looked at Alexander. He was the oldest. Alexander's eyes always went wide at this part of the story. Every firstborn son died, except for those who had the blood of the lamb painted on the doorpost. Boys, Daddy said, if it was your life on the line, would you grab any old lamb, one that was nasty and dirty and stank like a skunk, in exchange for your life? Or would you want the purest, cleanest lamb, one without spots or blemishes, as a sacrifice for your life? Rufus, and especially Alexander, knew which one they would pick. This week is Passover week, Dad was telling them. We'll travel to Jerusalem to offer our sacrifice for our sins and for atonement. Then we'll apply the blood of the lamb to our doorpost to make sure our family is covered by the blood of the lamb. Now off to bed with you two. We have an early start and a long walk tomorrow. As Rufus and Alex lay in bed that night, they determined in their hearts they would always make sure that they were covered by the blood. Today was it. Today was the day. It was the day of Passover, the day of sacrifice. And Jerusalem was all a hustle. There were people everywhere. So many people you could hardly move. It was always busy during the Passover festival, but this time it felt different. Where it was normally a fun and happy festive time, today it felt and sounded angry and cruel. The crowd was hollering and people's faces looked vexed. Voices were chanting and raving. It was like one big storming mob. What was going on? Keep close, boys. Grab onto my robe and don't let go, Dad hollered over the noise. Alexander punched Rufus in the arm. He pointed. He said, "Look, Rufus." Rufus wished he hadn't looked, but he couldn't look away. In the middle of a crowd headed their way was a man. They were hitting him and beating him with a whip. He had a vine of long thorns wrapped around his head. The thorns were digging into his head and blood was dripping down his face. His face, Rufus thought, looked kind and innocent. It reminded Rufus of their lamb Kenai. Clean and innocent before this sinful, wicked mob got a hold of him, he was dragging something on his back. A cross. They were going to crucify him. It was made out of 2 large pieces of wood, and it looked heavy, and he was already weak. As he got closer to them, he stumbled and fell. All of a sudden, a Roman guard grabbed Daddy. "No, no, what are you doing?" Alexander and Rufus yelled. Dad was looking back, saying something, but they couldn't hear over the noise of the crowd. They run towards their daddy. What was happening? What should they do? The Roman guard was yelling at Dad, You're gonna carry his cross." They eyeballed their daddy in dismay and felt a hand on their shoulder. It was the man. It was Jesus. They had heard of Jesus. They had heard about his teachings. Daddy had started following Jesus' teaching. He was struggling to get up, and as he used the boy's shoulder to stand and walk, they felt something warm flowing down their shoulders and their chest. It was blood. Blood from this innocent man was covering them. They walked with his hands on their shoulders and finally stopped at the top of a hill. They knew what would happen next, and they didn't want to see it, didn't want to be part of this. They were supposed to be at the temple with the priests sacrificing Cana, not here watching as they crucified Jesus, a man that they had heard teach, a man that they had heard all about his miracles. He had done no wrong, much like Cana. Their sheep had done nothing wrong, and yet he would be sacrificed for their sins. And more now than ever, they wanted to keep Cana. Alexander and Rufus covered their eyes, but they could still hear the pounding of the hammer as they nailed Jesus' hands and feet to the cross. Finally, the pounding stopped. Alexander and Rufus looked around in horror at what was going on, and they felt sick to their stomach. Their hearts were broken. While they wanted to run away and get away from this horrible scene, they could only sit at the foot of the cross. It had grown dark as they sat there. "Dad," Rufus said, "we missed the sacrifice today." Dad looked down, with tears running down his cheeks. He said, "No, son, we didn't miss the sacrifice. We experienced the sacrifice." "What about Cana, Dad?" asked Alexander. "You can keep Cana. This man Jesus took his place." We know that Jesus became the ultimate sacrifice for our sins. He was innocent. He became the lamb sacrificed for us. And we also know the rest of the story. If Alex and Rufus had gone to the tomb 3 days later, they would have discovered something. They would have discovered the tomb empty, that he arose, being victorious over death, hell, and the grave.